Hey YouTube, Kevin Clear here with a knife video for you. First of all, I want to say if you hear some banging and pounding in the background, there is a construction project happening like 50 feet away from here. So probably you won't hear a lot of it, but if you do, that's the explanation for the pounding. I went camping with my son this weekend, and that's the inspiration for this video. The knife that I brought with me on my belt was the Sog Huntspoint. There's the whole thing put together with the sheath, and there's the knife itself. This knife served me so well, and I was so impressed with it, as I have been over and over again, that I thought, you know what, I should make a video about this knife, even though primarily I talk about folding knives. When I do talk about a fixed blade, this is often the one I have in mind, because this is the one that I tend to use the most, with the exception of the Sheath SCH F9, which I use for bigger, heavier stuff, you know, processing wood and chopping and that kind of thing. Anyway, this knife is the Sog Huntspoint, and it is the Skinner variation. So it's specifically designed to be a skinning knife. However, I found this blade shape to be very, very versatile and extremely useful for all kinds of things. And as I said, I went camping, and this was the knife that literally did everything from processing wood to carving to doing some whittling around the fire to opening packages and preparing food and the whole bit. Great little fixed blade knife. I really like it, and thought I would share with you some of the reasons I really like it. And of course, one of the things that I don't find particularly great about this blade. Now, size and weight on this, it is 8 1/4 inches overall, 3.5 inch blade, and that 3.5 inches is measured from here, so it includes this half choil. And should be pointed out then that you really only have about 3 1/4 inches of cutting surface, and that's measured along the edge, not just in a straight line. Now, the weight on this is 3.7 ounces, and to be fair, there's about another 3 ounces here in the sheath. So overall, you're about 6 to 7 ounces for the whole system. All right. I'll comment a little more on the sheath when I get to that point, but I will say at this point, this could almost be an everyday carry knife. Normally, I bought it to be sort of a bushcraft, hunting, fishing knife, and I use it for that, and it works really well. Hiking, camping, I also usually have it with me. However, I should point out that it could be an EDC knife if it weren't for this sheath. This sheath does not lend itself to an everyday carry. And so, that's the limitation. However, the knife itself would serve perfectly fine for most EDC tasks. The one last measurement that I guess I should give you is this width is over, it's a good 5/8 of an inch. So it's pretty thick. And if you're thinking of EDCing it, in this configuration, what I have done with this before, I will say, is have the knife like this and just tuck it into a back pocket, sort of like that, and you still have about that much knife showing up. The problem is, in order to extract this knife, you've got to unclip the button and then take it out, and then you're definitely going to want to take the sheath out again before you put it back in, because it's hard to navigate that without cutting your pants or your butt or something. So primarily, hunting, fishing, great. Camping, hiking, all that stuff really stands out as a good knife for that. And of course, it also stands out as Sog's design purpose was as a skinning knife, and that's why you have all this belly. And it does work well for that as well. Now, let's get into the blade itself, and that's where there's a difference between this version, the Skinner, and the deboner or something like that. The other version, imagine this only without the rest of this choil. From here, it just goes straight up and finishes that way. So all of this belly is not in the other variation. There's also, by the way, wooden handled version of this knife. For myself, I checked these out in a store and was able to get a hold of them, and I much preferred the feel of the rubber. Also, knowing that I was planning to use this as sort of a bushcraft knife, camping knife, hiking knife, hunting knife, I wanted the orange so that if I didn't drop it or anything, it'd be easier to find. Plus, when it's all rubber, all synthetic is a little easier for, if you're going to use it for its intended purpose as a skinning knife, the blood, you know, is going to be an issue. So you want to get something you can clean up pretty easily. Now, back to the blade. That's what I was supposed to be talking about now. Just got a little sidetracked. This is, of course, 3.5 inches of Aus-8 steel. Of course, 3¼ inches is the actual cutting surface. Very sharp, and it does hold that edge very well. As you know, I'm a fan of Aus-8, and the way Sog does Aus-8, it's probably even better. Now, I haven't experienced every single company that makes anything out of Aus-8, right? But in my experience, Sog does a very, very good job of the heat treatment and the hardness and durability of their Aus-8 steel. One of the things I like about Aus-8, just FYI, is I've had this knife for a while, and I've used it for a lot, and see how the finish holds up. Just clean it up a little bit, and it looks like brand new. I just find Aus-8 doesn't mark up and chip up very easily compared to other steels at a similar price point. There is this nice finger choil here, which is really, really handy, and when I was doing some whittling, I was using it in this configuration. Full flat grind is just handy, right? Full flat grind is nice because it's super versatile. It just does everything, and you know that's something, at least for me, that's important in a knife. So there's that blade for you again. It is, of course, a drop point blade, and both the Skinner and the bone deboner are drop point. It's just the front edge of the blade that's changed on the two different versions of this knife. All right, so you already know that I did do just about everything you could think to do with a knife. I've done with this knife, even buttering bread, you know, cutting up vegetables for cooking, opening packages, and it just works really well. The edge is quite sharp. It comes sharp from the factory. This is not the factory edge, but I haven't sharpened it since I've gone camping this weekend, and after quite a bit of use, it still cuts really well. Handle, oh yeah, by the way, 56 to 58 Rockwell hardness is what Sog claims for this. I don't know that for sure. I don't have the capacity to test that, but it has held an edge really well for me and with everything that I've done with it. Now, the handle is rubber. As I said, it does come in a wooden handled version, but I prefer the rubber, mostly because of what I was planning to do with this knife. You know, if you're more of a traditionalist, maybe you'd prefer the wooden handle for your own knife, but for me, the rubber was the way to go, especially not only for what I plan to use it for, but out in the field, I find it's nice to have brightly colored knives. It is very comfortable. The rubber is grippy. Now, it should be pointed out that the way you're going to grip this knife, both choking up and choking down, may mean that you're going to be holding on either the back or the front where there's no handle, okay? And that will, if you're doing a prolonged cutting task, that can cause you some issues in terms of discomfort because, you know, obviously just a hard piece of metal is not nearly as comfortable on your fingers as this nice contoured piece of rubber. So just by the nature of the design, if you're, you know, choking up or choking down, you may find a little bit of a hot spot, and the jimping on this back end will cause that a little bit as well. Not very good for reverse grip. I mean, you can do it. Any knife can do a reverse grip, but this end is pretty pointy. Now, on the other hand, the pointiness of that end does mean, let's say you want to crack some nuts, you want to chip a piece of rock, you want to, you know, anything you might have to pound on, because of that extended tang, you can definitely do it without any issues. So that's pretty nice. Other than that, it is, you know, the handle is very comfortable and very grippy. And as I said, I've used this quite a lot in different conditions and never had an issue with the handle. Now, the sheath is, you know, just a sheath. This is my one hit on this knife. I would love it if there was sort of a Kydex modern option. This knife is probably designed for more of a purist, you know, hunting, fishing configuration, and that's fine, and it works well for that. And as I said, I've strapped this thing to my belt and done all kinds of, you know, hiking and hunting and all that kind of stuff, and it's never been a problem. However, I feel like if this was Kydex and if it was smaller, you know, and could be clipped to your person in some way, either to a pocket or to, the top of your pants, whatever. It would give you the choice to possibly even EDC this knife. And I do think it would be a good everyday carry knife because it's not too big. It's not a scary blade shape at all. And it's just the right size and shape, and even the blade shape for a lot of everyday carry tasks. However, because of this sheath, it's just not really an option as far as I'm concerned. Maybe your profession is different than mine. You're not around a bunch of people, or if you are, maybe you work in construction or on a truck driver or a lumber yard, and having a knife on your belt is no big deal. Then it would work fine for an everyday carry knife. For me, carrying this on my belt, hanging down at the side, flapping in the breeze, just is not going to happen. Just not practical at all. So if there is one hit that I have about this knife, it's definitely got to be the sheath. I'm not a big fan of these older traditional style sheaths. I definitely think, some things do improve over time, and the knife sheath is definitely one of them. The new Kydex sheaths where knives clip in and they can be clipped anywhere. They can be upside down, right side up, any variation. That's really, really an improvement. And, I wish Sog would, sort of notice that and change the way that they've done this sheath. I still like the knife. I still use the knife a ton. I will say that most of the time, if I'm doing a video about a folding knife and I say, if you want to do this, that, or the other, you should use a fixed blade. This is generally the fixed blade I have in mind. It is a very good knife, cuts really well. Any cutting task, this is going to perform well, and it'll even do, you could certainly baton with this. You could do some carving, fire sticks, all that stuff. It's pretty versatile. The only thing you're not going to do is do any kind of chopping. There's just not enough weight here, right? A chopper needs to be big and heavy and bulky. Maybe one of the Charade. Charade has a bunch of big, heavy knives that would work really, really well for this kind of chopping motion. This is not going to do it because there's just no weight at all out here at the blade. So overall, I find this to be an extremely useful, extremely versatile knife. I have put a lot of use into it, and I've never been disappointed. I've never thought to myself, boy, I really need a different knife for this. Within most normal use. As I said, you're not going to chop anything with it, but right, you wouldn't. I don't think anyone looks at this knife and says, boy, that could probably chop. I wouldn't suspect anyone would think that. So you can't really detract along those lines. And this is one of those things that I think most of the time for a bushcraft knife, for a fixed blade knife, you're going to have a trade-off. A lot of fixed blades that are, bushcraft, they are big and beefy. You've got a 1/4 inch of steel, and that's awesome for chopping and for certain cutting tasks. But try to make a fire stick with that. Try to skin an animal with that. You're just going to have a really hard time because a lot of those, the grind is so abrupt that if you're not chopping, it's almost useless for anything else. And so a knife like this that can do everything but chop, I find is more useful. Then if you do need to do some wood processing, you still have the option of batoning with this, where and so it'll even do that heavy processing that the big chopper will do. It just needs a little help from a piece of wood. And so overall, I find this to be an extremely useful, extremely versatile knife. Really, really handy for all kinds of applications. And I've had at no time have I thought, man, this is a problem or that's a problem. I've just been really impressed with the overall usefulness, comfort, even weight and size of this knife. So there you go. That's my take on the Sog Huntspoint, specifically the Skinner variation. You can take, the handle, the blade steel, all that stuff is the same, and the bone collector, just the blade shape is a little different. And maybe that's the blade shape that's more suitable for you. I can't really comment too much on that part. Anyway, the one negative is I'm not crazy about this sheath, but everything else is awesome. I really, really like the knife itself on its own merits is very, very good. So there's one more close look at it. One interesting thing is I feel like I don't need to flip this over as much because it's not a folding knife, so both sides are basically exactly the same. There you go, YouTube. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you soon.